Hello everyone, this is Mithril Turtle, and we are jumping into some Elden Ring invasions. Now, this is a Rune level 150 strength faith build that I'm running, and it's probably not an optimal setup, but it has a fun distribution of the stats to use a lot of fun boss weapons. So, we are starting off here in the hidden path to the Hallig Tree. And usually when in an invasion, I like to try and be friendly. However, friendliness is not always responded to in kind, especially by those who don't level their vigor. However, as we can see, I fall prey to the very classic Dark Souls pitfall of, I got hit. So, as you can see, we're going to be in for a lot of fun misadventures today, but we've got some really nice fights coming up. And we've got one right here in the base of the Hallig Tree, where there's actually usually a lot of brawls going on, either from people ganking, there are some people doing honest Haunter's Tongue runs, or in this case, we just have a couple of what seems to be honest co-op players just having a good time without Haunter's Tongue or Hunters. Now, the first thing that I'm doing is checking the surroundings to see whether or not the enemies have been cleared, because this will give a good indication of what I'm up against. Because if there have been a few times I've invaded here where all of the enemies have been cleared, and there are hosts and phantoms just trying to trap and blunder invaders. However, these guys are just here having a good time. At first I was a little bit wary from the phantom's name being a little bit of a middle school toilet humor, but we're just gonna have a good time. So the host is spamming projectiles. However, the trumpet bubbles don't do that much damage compared to Comet or some of the other sorceries, so they're just mostly something to be aware of. But I will say the Phantom does have some good fundamentals on follow-ups. However, here a falling heavy attack probably would have been much more threatening than the flies. One really nice thing about this build that I'm running is add the access to Erd Trio. That way I can use an FP in order to transfer a huge amount to gain back a huge amount of health. Now the weapons that I'm running here are the Crucible boss weapons. Siluria's Tree is very nice because it's a faith equivalent of Bolted Grandsax with less accuracy granted, but it can do a whole ton of damage from range when a host or phantom isn't paying attention, like there when they were engaging with the Hallig Tree soldiers. And here, I'm just trying to be very careful and finish off the Phantom, so that way I can either gain an numbers advantage with enemies, or at least knock things down to a one-on-one. Because Blasphemous Blade deals a lot of damage, and the Trumpet can put on some pressure if I'm not careful. And as always, it's a good idea to use the elevation changes in the stairs in order to escape some things. And using that dagger is a mistake, because even though it can get some very good chip damage in, the held position was not worth it, since I had a much higher damage output and they did not have a ton of health. Now here against the host, I'll give it to him that he knows how to space with the trumpet and transfer from the bubbles into the light attack chains. So it's making it relatively difficult for me to address with the heavier weapons that I usually start with. And usually I just start with them in case hosts have a lot of heavy armor to poise tank and not stagger. But the host is not super aggressive, so he allows me to change to a heavy thrusting sword in this case, which has a much better chase down for the light armor that he is wearing. So the combination of the better chase down and faster attacks allow me to pull out the win here, and it was a good fight. Good job, guys. Alright, so the next one we're jumping into is in Liurnia. Now, there are a lot of varying opinions about bonfire duelists. However, I believe I've faced this person before, maybe under with some different characters. They are very friendly, and if I remember, yeah, they're not rune-arced. We both just use our flasks, and we make sure the other person's ready before fighting. So, if nothing else, they're following really good etiquette, and they also have a lot of skill. They're really good at spacing with the claymore, and I think since I had the memory of facing them before, I knew I was at a little bit of at a disadvantage if I was going greatsword versus greatsword, so I went with the great spear, hoping to just get a lot of mix-ups, like with the heavy attacks and and later on trying to hit with the weapon art. Now, as you can see, the lock-on for the weapon art is not necessarily great to hit with against mobile opponents. They can usually dodge it pretty well, but the damage on it is very high, so transitioning into a free aim of it, it discourages them trying to strafe around if I throw that behind the main. And there I get in a few good attacks. The pierce damage off of Claymore is very strong, and they get me there with the well-deserved win. So, GG, friend. Good duel, good etiquette. Overall, just a great fight. Alright, and now we get to jump into a Catacombs invasion. Now, as I had mentioned in the Elfale invasion, one of the first things to do is just gain a survey of the area and see what all of the PvP situation is. Now, since they were unable to summon a cooperator, a red flag goes up to me thinking that this might be a gank, but it is not the case later on, especially since I know that the summoning pools are often by the boss door. I was relatively surprised to hear when I found that there was no host and the boss door was closed. So I think what it seems like they were probably just trying to summon a friend back mid-dungeon, or there was just a bad connection. And here we find Marika, one of the well-known NPC characters of the game, very plot central, and they have a pretty good cosplay, and their Phantom does a lot of damage with a combination of the Sword of Milos and Blasphemous Blade. So Power Stance and Great Swords does a lot of damage, and it is hard for me to get out of the way. But thankfully, with the Faith build, I have a lot of health, and Blasphemous Blade, despite having a huge AoE weapon art, it likes to get caught on corners, which unfortunately I know from experience more than anything else. And they're doing a very good job of aggressing back and forth to keep me off of them. Here I change over to the dagger with Bloodhound Step, mostly just to try and keep at least one of them off me at times. Here I feel a little bit safer because they had activated the fire, so I had thought that there's going to be a little bit more separation between the two, but the host does a really good job of keeping their Phantom alive. So, good fight, friends, and appreciate the fun celebration rather than what invaders usually get. Alright, in this next invasion, we are jumping into Castle Sol, which is a very common invasion point for higher level characters, and it's always a question whether or not you're running into a gank or honest co-op that is just trying to run to the boss and fogwall you. So here I'm just looking at the enemies, trying to see whether or not the elevator is functional, and what the heck is going on. So the host seems to be towards the front of the gate, and as I said, being wary of ganks and blenders, I am just very slowly approaching. However, I see an opportunity by the ladder, use a volcano pot, charge the weapon art, and that was really a poor hiding spot, and this host really needed to level their vigor. And we get a rematch later, so don't worry, the fun will continue. Alright, so this next invasion is pretty much just trying to block a fog wall. However, these two guys, I'm going to give, from knowing how this one turns out, I think they're just two honest people playing through the game, about to head to the boss, and they decide to give one hell of a fight. So despite Var's mask and the Raptor's feathers combination being well known for dishonest hosts in gameplay, this guy is actually just using two curved power stance and curved greatswords, so he's going to do a ton of damage, and if he does get a bleed status proc, he's going to get a further damage boost. And with the mage helping him out, I have to be very careful. So here I am using my Bloodhound Step Dagger, since he appears to have low poise, just to keep aggressing and getting the damage on him without getting obliterated by the mage and getting staggered by the spells. As you can tell, I'm a little bit more of a fan of fashion over function in terms of armor, so since I don't have a ton of poise, I'm very likely to get staggered by most spells that the mage would cast at me, and I'm definitely getting staggered by those curved greatswords. Hence, I'm going for speed and small damage over bigger hits so far. And the stairs actually do provide decent cover, despite there still being some relatively straight lines, and that's just because the spell, depending on where the caster is standing, the spells can get eaten by the elevation, and the caster is relatively cautious, which is very much in my favor. And for reference, Ordovis's Vortex and the area of effect on the bottom of it usually has a slightly lingering hitbox. I wouldn't call it an unfair lingering one. However, if someone dodges early, the tail end of that can catch them if they're trying to jump in and counterattack. So it is really nice for creating a little bit of extra space. Now, knowing that the mage doesn't have a ton of health, I can really just, whoever is low, just target them to try and either end this invasion or narrow things down. However, I'm feeling relatively confident since he is no longer wielding a staff and is either likely out of or low on blue flasks, and this allows me to jump in and finish him off with Siluria's tree. Now, this host is actually quite adept at spacing and dodges. I've got to hand it to him. It is very hard to aggress, and we are in for a long fight. And he is counterattacking relatively safely with those jump attacks, and here I probably should have switched to a dagger or one of my lighter weapons, but I am sometimes just like to keep trying with the heavier attacks. And although he's keeping safe distance, he's not leaving enough distance for me to safely use Erd Tree Heal. I do net some health, but not a ton. And points for this guy for just doing a very solid job on staying close and being aggressive. It is making it very difficult to try and finish him off, even though he has lost his friend. And the stairs, just since due to the reach of his jump attacks, it is very hard for me to catch up. And I'll admit, just because it's been a long fight at this point, I am getting a little bit desperate, and I'm not spacing super well on my part, and this guy has been learning really well, and I'm not really able to get the mix-ups very well. So, and since being the host, he does have the advantage of having a lot of blue flasks and just being very dodgy. I am just taking more I'm taking more flasks worth of damage than he is, and he very nicely waits to heal until he is at a safe distance. Yeah, he is just doing an excellent job. And not following up with the weapon art was a very good mix-up, since most people in PvP, even especially if the straight line shot is there, will try and follow up with the weapon art, and he's doing an excellent job of dodging mine. And just that rolling attack with the horizontal slice is just very hard for him. It's hard for me to dodge, and I believe Curved Greatsword's got a buff in 1.09, so that rolling attack might have been there. Here, I was more of a desperate heal, because I was running low on things, and I am just getting very aggressive at this point, and well, as you can see probably just from how I'm talking, I am not long for this fight, but this host did a absolutely wonderful job. Really long endurance match fight. Good game, good fight, and hopefully we'll see them again in a later episode. This one I have included here because this is basically a tiny kill box for phantoms. I see them already buffing up, and I'm just like, nope. I've been ganked here enough times, and apparently people still try to, so invaders, run while you can. Alright, so now we actually return to our castle soul host, and from everything that it seems, and especially since they have the same character name as their Steam profile, I'm pretty confident that they are running a gank. However, it's not very effective because they aren't clearing any enemies, and they are not very aware of invader spawn points. So, as often a lot of gankers do, they very blindly follow the invaders. However, I have a very strong bird behind me, so I'm reasonably confident to turn and burn with a powerful spell. And this guy does not actually do a lot of damage with his lightning spell, so I'm not too worried since my physic has passive healing in it, and I have a lot of FP, so I don't feel bad throwing some lightning back at them. And as you can see, besides ganking being their first mistake, their second mistake is letting this bird come into the fight. This bird, especially in New Game Plus, is able to completely destroy even high-level characters. And as you can see, the Phantom got obliterated. Now here, I'm just trying to see if I can land some passive damage, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to really get anything. I think there's just a minor graphical glitch here, because I did full damage on the hit, so he didn't have the bubble shield. I didn't even notice that I had gotten the backup invader, or I may have backed off a little bit, but the bird is all of the backup I needed for this one. And presumably that guy was hopefully just going after the host and wasn't an invader going after his friends, because that's unfortunately a common thing that happens when you get a co-invader. Alright, after successfully clearing out that gank, we come up against another bonfire duelist. As much as they have good manners, I will say that it is a little bit of bad etiquette to be great runed up, and the Cragblade heavy thrusting sword is also, well, it's a little bit on the trying very hard, not having as much fun side of things. However, they have a good honest fight. They don't heal minus the little bubble tear flask, which is still accepted as good manners, and I feel like I did a pretty good job of trying to dodge the light attack chains and running. So, good fight, host. Please just take the etiquette just as constructive criticism, and hopefully you get some more good fights, because, like I said, appreciate the manners, but hopefully there's a little bit more of a constructive lesson in there on not being great and having the great rune advantage if you're looking for an honest fight. And now for the final invasion of this episode, we jump back to our co-op friends in Elfale. So here I'm debating on switching things up a little bit so I have a better chase down, and I do like the unique light attack chains on the Banished Knight and Knight's Greatsword. However, I do like the look of the Banished Knight Greatsword. Here I try for the ambush, but either the chalice stand or just the natural range ran out, but I give him a good way to say hello, and we are ready to jump into the fight. Now, unlike with Ordovis's Vortex, I have a better chase down, and the caution there was because I forgot whether or not the big flowers can hurt me, so I was relatively cautious because I know that can do a lot of damage if it does connect. And here is just that Piercing Fang has a really good roll catch if you're not experienced with it in PvE, but good game, guys. You seem really friendly, and I hope you're having a great time in the lands between. So that's gonna be all for this one. I hope you all had an enjoyable time here along our PvP journey, and we'll be back with more Strength, Faith, Invasions, because I really like this build, and I hope you all enjoy watching. This is Mithril Turtle signing out, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.